We are in the second session of our series called Face to Face. We started last week with looking at how, I say kids, but you guys aren't little kids, but how kids are to interact with their parents and their siblings. Tonight, we're looking at friends. And the Bible has a whole lot to say about friends. A whole lot to say about friends, and we're going to look at some of those in just a moment. We're gonna go through some verses in Proverbs real quick. You don't have to turn to Proverbs. You can try and follow along if you want, but we're going to move pretty quickly through those. A small boy was asked to define what a friend is. He said, "A friend is someone who knows all about you and likes you anyway." That's what a friend is, right? Those of us who are privileged to have good friends, and by good we mean people that know us best, and they still like us. We know that to be true. Yeah, a true friend knows all about me and likes me anyways. There are, again, lots of things that the Bible has to say about friendship. Let's look at a few of them real quickly. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend." Many of you have heard these before. These are well-known verses. "A friend loves at all times." It goes on to say, "A brother is born for adversity," but a friend is someone who loves at all times. Even when they hate you, they love you. You know what I mean? Yeah? Anybody? You guys okay? Yeah. Oh, the smoke, right?
That boy copied a Mark Twain quote.
What's that? Mark Twain quote? What? Oh, it was a Mark Twain quote.
That was actually a quote.
Okay. Here's the next one. Look at this. Proverbs 27:6. "Faithful are the wounds of a friend." This is one of my favorites. This is one that not a lot of us understand. That a friend is sometimes going to wound us, but it's going to be a good thing. They're going to correct us, rebuke us at times. You know that friend that will tell you, "Hey, you're being a jerk. Stop." That's a good thing. Okay? Proverbs 27:9. Also in Proverbs 27, by the way. "Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend." I don't know, are you even allowed to say sweetness and man's friend in the same sentence? We're so tough, we're so manly, right? We don't do sweet things. But here, look at this. "And the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel." Beefy counsel. That friend of yours that just gets down to the nitty-gritty and just says, "Listen, quit messing around. Here's what you need to do." And they just tell you straight up. It's a good friend. But also in Proverbs 27, "As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Do not be discouraged, ladies," because no doubt these apply to the ladies also. You're going, "Well, it just says men," and that's because ladies, they have it all together. They don't need any of this stuff, right?
Amen.
Please. Okay? It's applicable to the ladies also, but look at this. "As iron sharpens iron," okay? "So a man sharpens the countenance of his friend." And then check this one out from Proverbs 12:26. "The righteous should choose his friends carefully." The righteous should choose his friends carefully. And then he goes on to tell us why. "For the way of the wicked leads them astray," alluding to the fact that our friends influence us, either for the good or for the worse, either for the better or for the bitter, right? A good friend is going to do what the writer of Hebrews told the Hebrews, spur one another on toward love and good works. Those of you that are familiar with horses and spurs, right? You spur those things, you kick those things in the rib, and you let them know, "I'm in charge, here we go." We are to actually do that with one another, spur one another on toward love and good works. And those are good friends. Many of us are familiar with the verse, I believe it's in Corinthians, a bad company corrupts good morals. So there's influence there from those friends that we have, our circle of friends. And hopefully, we are influencing them also in godliness, hopefully. But I told you to turn to John chapter 15. John chapter 15. We're going to see some things very quickly, and then we're going to move over to 1 Samuel and see those things actually, what they look like. In John chapter 15, at verse 12, Jesus actually begins to talk about friends and what friends do and what they look like and how they act toward one another. Now, you and I need to understand that this study tonight on friends is not exhaustive, meaning we're not going to cover every single thing the Bible has to say about friends, okay? That's impossible. There's no way we could do that. So we are getting a general idea of what friends are supposed to look like, you and I, the friends that we have, how we should be interacting with one another and treating with one another. In John chapter 15, right in the middle of Jesus teaching his disciples, he says this at verse 12. This is my commandment. So he's commanding them something. He says that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his, what, church? Help me out.
Friend.
Thank you very much. Verse 14, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. Verse 15, no longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. There are four major things, we might say four foundations of a good friendship right here, straight from the lips of Jesus. This is what Jesus thinks about the matter. He says, go back to verse 12 where it says this. This is my commandment, Jesus says, to his disciples. This is his commandment. What's the commandment? The commandment is that you love one another as I have loved you. Now, we're going to talk more about that word love in just a moment. We all go, well, I know what the word love means. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's start by saying this. What is the first of those four things? The first of these things, as far as friends are concerned, is a mutual love. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another. That you love someone and that they reciprocate that love. They return that love. You see, it is possible that you are a very, very good friend to someone. However, they might not be a good friend to you, and then you look at your friend right now, like, yeah, that's us. I'm such a good friend to you, and you just treat me so bad, okay? But it's possible that you are a very good friend. However, one-way love does not constitute a friendship. You may have an acquaintance. You may be a very good friend to that individual, but they may not be your friend. You understand? All of us probably have those relationships, or at least we're aware of that, or we've been involved in something like that before where, man, it was one way, I was being a good friend and trying to be loyal and do all the things that a good friend does, and this person wasn't returning that. That was an acquaintance. That was not a friend. That does not qualify as a genuine friendship. In order for a friendship to be a genuine friendship, it must be mutual. Jesus says there, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Okay? So it's mutual. But the second thing that we learn about this kind of this friendship, he says it at the end of verse 12, that you love one another as I have loved you. Now remember, he's speaking to the disciples. And he says, you must love one another as I have loved you. How did Jesus then love the disciples? If Jesus is telling his followers, you need to love one another the same way that I loved you, how did Jesus love his followers? Well, he goes on to tell us in verse 13. Greater love has no one than this. There's no greater demonstration of love than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. So the second thing that we find out about a genuine friendship is not only that it is mutual love, but that it involves sacrificial love reciprocated once again, that both parties are sacrificing for one another. We know that Jesus sacrificed for his friends. However, the disciples, check this out. At this moment when Jesus was first speaking these words, as they were receiving this, they did not understand all that Jesus meant by that statement. That to lay down one's life for his friends is the greatest demonstration of love. They did not understand that because you see, Jesus was speaking this before he was crucified. And he's telling them something. He's telling them, look, friends sacrifice for one another. And shortly thereafter, they would learn, it would be a very vivid picture. They would see it. They would see him hanging on a cross, dying for his friends. But certainly up to that point, they had his example of sacrifice, self-sacrifice. I mean, this is a man, I want you to think about this. Jesus, as he's teaching these disciples and discipling them, he's in his early 30s, what some call the prime of his life. Some of you are like, 30s? You're like almost dead by then, right? But 30s is considered to be prime. Some people say it's, mid-20s, somewhere in there. Mid-20s, you're still pretty dumb. Just blessing you. Just letting you know, when you get there, just know that, there's still some more growing to do, okay? When you get in your 30s and 40s, you just realize that you're older, but you're still dumb, okay? But listen, he's in his early 30s. He's not married. And he's committed himself to full-time, 24/7 discipleship of these 12. And there were other disciples also, but generally we hear the 12 disciples. He committed himself to discipling them. Now, I don't know if you're aware of what discipleship really entails, but at that time, when you committed yourself to a certain teacher, you were committing yourself to follow them, to learn all that they had to teach you. And Jesus did that 24/7 for about 3.5 years of his life. So you talk about sacrifice. He was sacrificing on their behalf. And he's saying, I have loved you, and you need to do the same thing, because as what Jesus is telling us is, that's what friends do for one another. They sacrifice for one another. Now, this sacrificial love that we are talking about here in verse 13 is the word agape. Everybody say agape.
No,
Now, as you continue on in your church life, you are going to hear people say agape love.
Yes, because that's what
However, the correct pronunciation is agape.
No. Yeah.
And now, when you hear someone say agape love, you can go.
No.
You can be prideful about it and go, no, I know the real pronunciation. Okay? But you're going to hear it as agape. It's okay. We can call it agape. We could be wrong for tonight. Okay? Agape. Greater agape has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Now there were different words that could have been used to say love. We have a hard time because I love you, but I also love In and Out. I love you, but I also love pizza. We have one word, love, and we use it for everything. So that I love my mom, and I love this new show, and we just use it, and yet we understand that they're not on the same level. No, we love this individual far more than we do this show, but we use that same word. They had different words for love, and the word that he used was agape. Okay? And agape means unconditional, self-sacrificial love. Okay? You have heard of Philadelphia, the city of, comes from the word phileo, brotherly love. Okay? But he used agape, unconditional, self-sacrificial love. So he actually says this in verse 12, this is my commandment, that you love one another, that you unconditionally, self-sacrificially love one another as I have unconditionally, self-sacrificially loved you. Verse 13, greater unconditional, self-sacrificial love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. So that love that he's talking about here is specifically, he doesn't use the word for friends. It's the word for unconditional, self-sacrificial. It means that I love you regardless of you. It means what that little boy said. What's his name said?
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
But it has to do more.
It's the same thing that Mark Twain said. It's that friend who knows all about you and likes you anyways.
Friendship.
And I've got, he's so bothered right now, huh?
No, it's just. Never mind. Just yeah.
Is it okay to move on?
Sorry.
It is a love that sees all that we are and yet loves us anyways. And I gotta be real honest with you. I'll be real honest with you. I've got to do that because I'm up here teaching, right? I'm supposed to be honest. I have very, 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 very few friends that love me that way. Some of you may actually like me. There may be a few of you that might even say, I love you. However, you do not know me very well. We see each other for an hour and a half. Some of you get here early. We see each other for a couple of hours. That's all you see. You do not see me at home. You do not see me driving. You do not see me when I'm here at the office during the week. You do not see me when I'm watching a soccer game on a Sunday night. Yeah, right? You don't see me during those times. So some of you may dare to say, yeah, I do love you, Chris. However, you do not really know me. I have very few friends that really do know me. In fact, I can think of two that know me. And I know of those two, one of them really, really knows me. Some of you have met him. His name is Augie. He's been here before. Very good friend for a lot of years. He knows me. And I have been, over the years, very good to him. And I have also been very bad to him. I have treated him very well, and I have been nasty to him. And yet, his love never waned. He's been mad at me before, but he has never stopped loving me. And that is rare. It is rare for you to let someone in, they find out all about you, and then they love you anyways. That's what he's talking about here. It's self-sacrificial, it's unconditional. Greater love. There's no greater demonstration of love than this in verse 13, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Kind of a challenge, huh? Now that we start to think about, man, my friendships, I don't know if my friendships really look like that. But in verse 14, he's not done yet. He says in verse 14, you guys are going to like this one, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. You're like, yeah, now we're talking. You can be my friend if you do what I say. And some of us are like that, right? Like, if you're not going to play my game, my way, I'm going to take it and go back home. Right? Some of you are like that. Like, this is mine, and if you don't do it the way I want you to do it, I'm leaving. Okay? That's an unconditional love. That's not really a friendship. But what he's talking, what is Jesus really saying here? Is he saying, listen, you can be my friends. You can be my friends as long as you do what I tell you. And if you don't do what I tell you, then I don't like you. Get out of here. Is that what he's saying? No. What he's talking about is loyalty in verse 14. You are my friends. If you're loyal, then we're friends. If you got my back, if you're listening to what I've been telling you, then we're friends. But if you've just been, he's saying to his disciples, but if you've just been putting on a show, and one of the disciples was just putting on a show, wasn't he? What was his name again? Judas. So he had 11 friends there, and then he had one that was a phony. And he's saying to the disciples, listen, if you're loyal, if you're listening to what I tell you, there's loyalty there, if there's dedication, then we're friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. That is not a verse for you to take to your friends and say, listen, you better do it my way or else you're not my friend. Okay? In a friendship, there is always compromise, back and forth. We're helping one another out. But there's one more thing that he mentions here in verse 15. This is a good one. He says, no longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. He says, but I have called you friends. And then he tells them why he calls them friends at the end of verse 15. For, or because, all things that I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. That indicates for us that a friendship not only includes mutual love, sacrificial love, loyalty, but also transparency. We cannot consider ourselves to be good friends with someone if we are not open and honest, see-through, transparent with that individual. If we are hiding things from them, if we are withholding from them, if we are receiving good things but not sharing it with them, then we cannot consider them to be friends. Transparency. Jesus, speaking on this topic, says, listen, I've been transparent with you. I've shown you all things. Everything that I've learned, I've passed it on to you. It's a transparency. One writer said this, oh, the comfort. This is not Mark Twain. Oh, the comfort. The inexpressible comfort. Some of you will understand this. Oh, the comfort. The inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person. Having neither to weigh thoughts nor measure words, but to pour them all out just as they are, chaff and grain together, knowing that a faithful friend will take and sift them, keeping what is worth keeping, and then, with the breath of kindness, blow the rest away. And we've got to be honest. We probably know, we thought we had a bunch of friends, but now going through this, it's like, my friendships don't really look like this, man. But this is the goal. This is what you and I are aiming for. To have a mutual love with one another, sacrificial love where both of us are sacrificing on behalf of the other, a loyalty, dedication. I'm dedicated, I'm loyal to you. I'm going to stick with you through thick and thin. I'm going to be there for you in your good times and your bad times, in the ups and the downs. And yeah, we may butt heads and we may fight, and there may be times when we just say, I hate you and I hate you too. But we always come back and say, no, I love you. Forgive me. And then a transparency where we're open and we're honest with that friend. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do because all of us in this room, there are things about us that we know about ourselves that we're afraid other people will not like. And few and far between are those that would really know us and still love us. In 1 Samuel chapter 18, would you turn there, please? We're going to take the last about 10 or 15 minutes to look at 1 Samuel, and we'll look at some verses here. What we're going to do is we're going to look at perhaps the most famous friendship in the Bible. This is Jonathan and David. Jonathan and David, they had an incredible friendship. In fact, what we will see in this friendship is all four of these foundational points here in the friendship of Jonathan and David. It begins in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and we'll move quickly through, so try to follow along. In 1 Samuel chapter 18, that's in the Old Testament, by the way, and 1 Samuel actually comes right before 2 Samuel, if that helps. 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, the Chronicles are there, Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, in the Bible. Okay, 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 18 says this. Now, when he, that's David, had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. So the beginning of a friendship. Saul took him that day and would not let him go to his father's house anymore. And here in verse 3, we see the first of our points. There is a mutual love. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, an agreement together, because he loved him as his own soul. So they together made this agreement. There was a mutual love for one another. Let's make a covenant. Let's make an agreement that we're always going to be friends, that we'll always support one another. All of these things, we'll see them. In fact, the next one on our list after mutual love is a sacrificial love. And we see it immediately after the friendship begins in verse 4 from Jonathan. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him. It's a royal robe. His dad, Jonathan's dad, is Saul. He's the king. So whatever he has, whatever Jonathan has, that's royalty. And he takes it off and gives it to David. It says in verse 4, and Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. And I wonder really if David tried to put it on then or what he did, because as the story goes, see, just prior to this, he's just finished killing Goliath. So he's a young boy. And he had tried to put on Saul's armor, and Saul's armor did not fit. Well, now Jonathan says, hey, I'm giving you this. Now, I want you to think about this. Jonathan is giving up something very dear to him. This is not just some, measly piece of jewelry or, what's that in the corner? Yeah, you can take it. I was going to throw it away, but you can have it. I really like you. Listen, this is Jonathan's way of defending himself. It says there that he gave him his armor, his sword, his bow, his belt. In other words, whatever Jonathan had in his possession at that moment, David, is yours. I want to give this to you as a symbol, as a pledge of my love for you. I mean, they've just seen each other, but something stirred in the heart of Jonathan. Move with me, skip with me to the next chapter, 1 Samuel chapter 19, at verse 1. Because there, we see the friendship continues, and we see what's the next thing? Oh, loyalty. Verse 1, now Saul spoke to Jonathan. Saul is the king, speaks to his son Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David. You're like, what in the world happened in chapter 18 that all of a sudden he wants to kill him? Saul was jealous. He was jealous of David. Notice this in verse 1. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. So Jonathan told David, loyalty, saying, my father Saul seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning, and stay in a secret place and hide. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe, I will tell you. Here's the loyalty in verse 4. Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, because his works have been very good toward you. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine. And the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood to kill David without a cause? So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be killed. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. So Saul, or rather Jonathan, is loyal to David, even when it comes to his own father. And he's not being deceptive to his father, but he's being loyal to his friend, David. Even when he realized, man, I'll bring this up in just a moment when we get to the end here. But skip to the next chapter where the friendship continues, 1 Samuel chapter 20. Because the loyalty continues, then David fled from Naioth and Ramah and went out and said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity, and what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? So Jonathan said to him, by no means, you shall not die. Indeed, my father will do nothing, either great or small, without first telling me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." Then David took an oath again and said, "Your father certainly knows that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said, 'Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved.' But truly," this is David speaking, "but truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death." So Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you yourself desire, I will do it for you." There's that loyalty. Remember that? Jesus said, what did he say about that? You're my friend if you do what I command you, the loyalty there. Verse 5, "And David said to Jonathan, 'Indeed, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king to eat. But let me go, that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked permission of me that he might run over to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If your father says this, it is well, your servant will be safe. But if he is very angry, be sure that evil is determined by him. Therefore you shall deal kindly with your servant." David says to Jonathan, "For you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. Nevertheless," he tells Jonathan, "if there is iniquity in me, if there's deceit, if there's sin in me, kill me yourself. For why should you bring me to your father?" And then finally, beginning at verse 9, we see the last of these things in action, which is the transparency. "But Jonathan said, 'Far be it from you. For I knew certainly that evil was determined by my father to come upon you. Then would I not tell you?'" I'm sorry, let me reread that. Verse 9. "For Jonathan said, 'Far be it from you. For if I knew certainly that evil was determined by my father to come upon you, then would I not tell you?' Then David said to Jonathan, 'Who will tell me? Or what if your father answers you roughly?' And Jonathan said to David, 'Come, let us go out into the field.' So both of them went out into the field. Then Jonathan said to David, 'The Lord God of Israel is witness. When I have sounded my father sometime tomorrow or the third day, and indeed there is good toward David, and I do not send to you and tell you, may the Lord do so, and much more to Jonathan. But if it pleases my father to do you evil, then I will report it to you and send you away, that you may go in safety, and the Lord be with you as he has been with my father.'" So they actually devised this plan where, David, if there's bad news from my dad, I'm going to tell you, the transparency. And what ends up happening, the story continues, that Jonathan finds out the truth. His dad, Saul, his father, Saul, the king, wants to kill his best friend, David. But Jonathan was transparent. And he went to David, and he revealed to David the truth. That, yeah, my dad's crazy. My dad wants to kill you. You're like, I've got some friends my dad wants to kill. I want you to think about this. Think about this. Jonathan, we're seeing all of these things in action here. There was a mutual love between Jonathan and David. There was a sacrificial love. We saw that from the giving of the things that Jonathan was giving. And David goes on to give back to Jonathan. Jonathan's got a son later on. It's a beautiful story. Mephibosheth, I think his name is, and he treats him so very well. Loyalty, they were loyal to one another. We saw Jonathan being loyal. And then there's this transparency, where Jonathan is transparent with David. And we go, well, yeah, they're friends, but I want you to think about this. Who's the king?
Saul.
Saul. Saul is the king. And Saul has a son named what?
Jonathan.
Who's next in line after Saul to be king?
Jonathan.
And when Saul felt threatened by this young man, who, by the way, had been anointed king already. Hadn't been appointed yet, but he had been anointed king. Jonathan could have teamed up with his dad. He could have stopped for a moment and said, you know what? Maybe we should kill David, because he may just take over the throne. So maybe we just need to wipe him out right now. Because that throne, Jonathan could have thought, that throne is going to be mine one of these days. But his love would not allow him to hide something from David. It was a genuine friendship between the two. And because of that, he was absolutely transparent with David. No, this is the truth. This is what is going to happen. That's what a true friendship looks like. And some of us, we've got to be careful because some of us may be thinking, yeah, I need more friends like that. I don't have friends like that. But the question is, it's a good thing to have friends like this. But another question is, are you a friend like this? Are you that type of an individual to your friends? Are you calling people friends that you ought not be calling friends because you've not been a very good friend? This is what we strive for. This is how Jesus saw. This is what true friendship looks like. And this is what Saul and Jonathan, or David and Jonathan, had with one another. It was a true friendship, a godly friendship. They were open and honest with one another, and loyal and sacrificial, and it was mutual back and forth. So God, help us to be these kinds of friends. These kinds of friends to the individuals, to the people that we have in our life. Friends are so very precious. That is the truth. We talked about parents and siblings last week. So very precious. But so are friends. They can be so beneficial to us. So you and I have got to exercise some caution in those that we are calling friends, those that we are joining in these relationships with. But we also want to strive to be these types of friends. Father, thank you so much.